This is Here's How, Ireland's political, social and current affairs podcast, presented by William Campbell.
Thank you for downloading episode 110 of Here's How for the 3rd of September 2020. We've heard from Irish and Scottish nationalists on this podcast recently, but what about the Unionists? On this podcast, I'll talk to one woman from a loyalist background who is breaking the mould.
Here's How is Ireland's political, social and current affairs podcast. Make your view heard. Just dial 076 603 5060 and tell the world what you're thinking. Your voicemail may be included in the next podcast. You can find tips on recording your contribution and other ways to contact the show at here'show.ie/call.
Coming up in a few minutes.
So the whole thing with Brexit, I have came to, become aware that there are people now speaking out within the unionist community who are saying, I think actually United Ireland would be better. But that's something you never would have heard years ago.
Really? Pause. Wait. But you're absolutely right. That's something you wouldn't have heard years ago. Mm-hmm. But roll back on that. Give me more detail on that. People who you regard as unionists. That's coming up shortly. But first, a big thank you to Jason Warnes and to Paddy Walsh. They both signed up as donors on Patreon since the last podcast. And thanks indeed to everyone who has signed up. I really appreciate them all. For the people who don't know, Patreon is a website that allows people to donate $1 or $2 per podcast or per month. And with that, I can devote more time to research and finding interesting guests. If you think that you could do the same as Jason and Paddy and the other donors, there's details on the website and at the end of the show. I was sitting down to do an editorial piece for this podcast, and I had been particularly struck by the apparent arson attack on a house in Carnmore in Galway, which, it was believed locally, was about to be allocated to a traveller family. There were many comments on social media in support of the family and condemning the attack, but there was a significant strain, usually from anonymous accounts, that were clearly hostile to the family that had been slated to move in, and a subset of them were explicitly advocating and praising violence against travellers and their property. These comments came predominantly from the type of account that has a fake profile picture and a username ending in a long random number. But not everyone making comments that seemed hostile to travellers was so careful to be anonymous. Galway City Councillor Noel Larkin was quoted in the Irish Independent as demanding that locals should be consulted before travellers be allowed to move into the area. It's not the first time that Larkin has been in controversy for his views. He said before people filmed while taking part in a fracas in Galway, white, apparently Irish people, were, quote, behaving like Zulus. He also said that immigrants to Ireland are guilty of blatant misuse of the social welfare system and claimed, Enda Kenny style, that a non-national told him work is hard, social welfare is easy. He also wrote a letter saying that traveller housing should not be, quote, forced on communities, and that settled people were due an apology from travellers for calling them racists. Galway Bay FM have had a case taken against them to the Broadcasting Authority of Ireland for remarks that Larkin made in an interview that they broadcast. As I said, I was sitting down to do this editorial and I wanted to check the quotes from Noel Larkin, so I rang him up, and rather than do my whole spiel, I think it's better just to let you hear the call.
Hello?
Hello, is that Noel?
Yeah.
Hi, Noel, my name is William Campbell. I'm calling from the Here's How.ie podcast. I just, looking at the Independent this morning, I just wanted to do a bit of fact-checking that you were quoted correctly. Is that okay with yourself?
Carry on. It shouldn't take too long, will it?
No, just a couple of minutes. I'm just looking here. It says, I don't think the solution is buying a house in the area without consulting the locals. It's not that people are racist. If people have genuine fears for their own property, then they must be addressed. Is that kind of representing what you said correctly?
Yeah.
And can I ask, do you live in the area? Have you been there for long?
I don't live in the area. I represent the east side of the city. I'm a councillor on the east side of the city. But that is just on the it's the other side of the border, if you know what I mean. Like it's within
the boundary between the areas.
Yeah, it's right on the boundary, and I would personally know quite a few people out there.
And have you, where you live now, would you be sort of a native there, someone who's lived there all your life, or?
No, I came into Galway after doing the Leaving Cert from Portumna, and I started working in Galway here, and I bought the house in '85, and I'm still here.
I understand. You can understand that people, when they see something like saying that moving into an area without consulting the locals, was there a consultation process when you moved into your house?
Well, I suppose you see, in recent times we've had quite a lot of antisocial behaviour in areas of social housing that the council, under the remit of the council. One of the major fears that people have is that the council haven't got the tools to deal with antisocial behaviour.
Sure, but how does that relate to a family moving into a house?
Well, you see, if the council buy a house, it's probably going to be a social house.
Yeah, well, by definition, yeah.
We have no problem with that, but who deals with, if in the event of antisocial behaviour, who deals with it? That's the biggest question we have, who's going to deal with it? It's in county council area, so the county council have no jurisdiction over it.
Surely the Gardaí would be responsible for that.
Well, you see, who's going to deal with it? Because our wardens have no jurisdiction outside the city boundary. So, in the event of antisocial behaviour, this is going to fall between two stools. Because
I understand that, but can you understand somebody, maybe Noel, saying that nobody was consulted before you moved into your house, and you didn't expect them to be consulted, did you?
I didn't expect it to be consulted.
So can you see how people are feeling that that's prejudiced against travellers if you expect that when a traveller family moves into a house?
Well, I really think that we're seeing a beat here somewhere. It's not that we or me or anybody has any problem with any family moving into the house.
Roll back. Sorry, no, because I'm looking at stuff on Facebook here, and there's people on Facebook calling whoever burnt down that house heroes. There's clearly some people who have problems with travellers.
That's ridiculous.
I'm looking at it here.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I certainly want to distance myself from that. That's a ridiculous comment to put up.
I understand, but when somebody says that locals should be consulted before travellers are allowed to move into a house, that's sort of winking at the racists, isn't it?
Well, it's not really, because
But do you say? Hold on for a second. Do you say that locals should be consulted before you moved into your house?
Well, let the council give the locals there that if there is antisocial behaviour, and it's only an if.
Who's talking about antisocial? Was there any antisocial behaviour associated with this house?
In the past, but it has never been a social house in the past.
Are you familiar with the family that was moving in?
I'm not familiar with the family that was moving in.
So how do you know there's any association with antisocial behaviour? I'm
saying in the event. I'm not saying this family will, but I'm saying in the event. Who deals with it? In the event of antisocial behaviour.
The same issues, I would have thought, the same authorities that deal with anybody else. If the Gardaí need to be called, the Gardaí need to be called.
You're missing the boat here, you see. You're missing the point here. The point is that our wardens in Galway City Council have no jurisdiction to go outside of our boundary area, out to a county area. And likewise, the county wardens are saying, well, it's not our house, it's belonged to Galway City Council. So
Noel, if you were committing antisocial behaviour in your house, who would deal with it?
Presumably, well, the council would. Or should.
Yeah. So what's the issue then?
Well, the issue is that the law is very, very lax here with antisocial behaviour in our area, and I've voiced this in the past. If a family has,
Noel, you're jumping. Can you see, Noel? Can you see that? I can see also on Facebook here people flat out accusing you of being a racist because somebody asks you about travellers and you go straight to antisocial behaviour. What's the connection there?
There are some travellers engaging in antisocial behaviour,
as there are many settled people,
as others are as well. Yes, indeed. And,
yeah, but can you see how? No, look. Well, the flat out question is: did anybody who live near you, if anybody in your area, would they be entitled to be consulted before a racist moves into the area, for example?
I don't really know where you're going with this now.
But no, you're in. Well, here's where I'm going. And Noel, here's why I think that there seems to be an issue for you to answer here. It appears that you are applying a different standard to travellers than you are to the rest of the community.
Well, you see, we have no way of knowing if it's going to be a traveller family that's moving in there.
That's what's been reported.
Like under data protection, we're not given that information.
Quite rightly.
So
quite
we
rightly.
don't know who's going to move in there.
And what business? And what business is it?
If it's going to be
Noel, if you buy a house, and you move into it.
Well, if a person recently, a paedophile recently exiting a jail.
Noel, are you comparing travellers to paedophiles?
I am not comparing travellers to paedophile. I'm saying should the people in the area be notified that this person is going to live in their area?
There's laws to deal with that.
There may be laws to deal with it, but if it's antisocial behaviour that's coming into an area, are there laws to deal with that adequately to protect the neighbourhood?
Yeah, but what does that have to do with this traveller family moving into this particular house?
Well, we don't know if it's a traveller family.
And what business is it of yours?
What's that?
What business is it of either yours or the neighbours who's moving in? Nobody has a veto over who moves into the house next door to them.
No one has, no.
Just but like your neighbours didn't have a veto over you moving in. You bought the house, you moved in, or you allocated the house by the local authority or whatever, and you moved in. And it very strongly seems to me that you're applying a different standard to travellers.
The only question that's involved here is, in the event of antisocial behaviour, because it is a council house, if it is, who has jurisdiction over it? Which council is going to take responsibility for it?
The Garda Síochána.
I know, but the Gardaí don't get involved initially. I mean, the council have to get involved themselves.
Well, then, to put the question back to you, if that, and you're saying that's in Galway County District, if there was antisocial behaviour in a private house there, who would get involved?
I can't speak about the county, but I can speak about the city.
Yeah?
Yeah, but if there's a let's say a let house here and there's antisocial behaviour in it, then I would be getting on to our wardens to come out to this house and do the warnings first.
And why would that not be possible in the county area?
Because our wardens have no
why the county wardens?
But the county wardens will tell us that it's not their house.
Have they confirmed that to you?
No, they haven't confirmed that to me. But I know that.
Okay, no. The real reason I'm calling you is because there is a mass of poison on Twitter and Facebook of people cheering and calling the people who burnt down that house heroes. Who do you think those people would vote for if they were in your district?
I've absolutely no idea. I don't know anybody that would put up comments like that. And if I did, I would certainly distance myself from them immediately.
Can you accept that people looking at this from the outside see your comments and see that you're saying that people are entitled to be consulted before travellers move in next door? They see that as you winking at those racists, at those people who are advocating violence and saying, I can't really say it out loud, but I support you.
No, I don't see that at all. All I want is that both sets of councils, Galway City Council and Galway County Council, speak to the residents in the area and assure them that.
But that's outrageous. That would be an outrageous thing to do.
I know, but they have to be fair. If there is antisocial behaviour,
where is the antisocial behaviour? Have this family got a history of antisocial behaviour?
In the event.
Very simply, have you intervened and said that in any case of a settled family moving into a house, not from the traveller community, have you ever advocated that when people not from the traveller community move into a house, that the locals should be consulted? Are you on the record doing that?
I'm not.
Okay, and can you see that when you do that to travellers, you would demand a higher standard of travellers than settled people? That's clearly racist.
We don't know it's a traveller family.
That's what's been reported, and that's why the house was burnt down.
I know that, but we do, like, under data protection, like, we've not been given that information.
You may not have, but that's been widely reported, and the people cheering this on social media are cheering it because it's keeping a traveller family out of a house.
No, well, I don't agree with that. That's absolute. I don't know who's putting up this, like, but it's.
Noel, if I was one of them and I was reading that quote from you in the paper, I think you can't really say it out loud, but you probably support me. That's what I would be thinking.
But they're wrong.
Do you think you should make that clear?
Absolutely.
So will you then be saying that you'll apply the same standard where there's travellers are moving in as where settled people are moving in?
Absolutely. And why not?
So what are you saying is that every time somebody moves house, the locals where they're moving to have to be consulted?
I'm saying that in this particular case, it's a new case where Galway City Council have gone outside their area to purchase a house.
That happens all the time. That happens all the time where people from local authorities have somewhere in over a line.
Not here it doesn't. This is the first time that we're aware of that it happened in Galway City.
It seems to me that you are making a differentiation based on the popular belief that travellers are moving in, and you're making a demand that is not made of settled people, and that seems...
The only thing that I want is that Galway City Council and Galway County Council let the people in the area that's living in that area know who's responsible for the house. Is it Galway City Council or is it Galway County Council?
And why didn't you just put a question into the council staff? You're a councillor, you do that all the time, I'm sure.
We did, and I got no answer back.
As to who is responsible?
Yes.
Have you published that?
But you see, I haven't published that yet because this is ongoing now.
You've put in a council question. When did you put that question in?
I expect this to come to an amicable end. I expect this.
Well, clearly not, since the house has been burnt down.
That's unfortunate, but this could be that may be an electrical fault as well as everything else. You know, I mean,
on your best guess, what would you think it is?
I would say, I know people that bought houses there in the recent past, in the last 3 or 4 years, and that they rewired the houses completely.
Yeah, that's not the question. On your best guess, what do you think this is?
No, that's an unfair question. I mean, on my best
when
guess,
there's people on Facebook and Twitter cheering that this has been burnt down and cheering that a family, you don't think that might be connected with the fact that the house went on fire?
Put it on record that I am totally at heart that people would come on Facebook and do this.
But Noel, can you see the contradiction there? And I accept that you're rejecting that violence. But can you see the contradiction there that you are demanding a different standard be applied to travellers than to the rest of the population?
I'm not demanding any different for travellers here. I don't know for sure that that's going to be a traveller family that's going in there.
That's been widely reported. Do you not read the papers?
I do, but I mean,
and the same people who read the papers are commenting like this on Twitter.
No, I really don't know where this is going now. We don't know that it's a traveller family. I don't know 100% that it's a traveller family.
That's been widely reported, Noel.
It is widely
and it's
reported.
Clear that the people who are incredibly prejudiced against travellers believe that.
Well, I can't call what people believe or don't believe. You know, all as a councillor is I'm doing my best to try and get houses for everybody. The 3,700 families that are on our housing list, we need to get them housed.
Okay, listen, Noel, thanks very much for that.
Okay, thank you.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Do you agree? Do you disagree? If you want your point of view heard, dial 076 603 5060 and leave a contribution for the show. The lines are open 24/7 and you can find tips on how to record a good contribution and other ways to contact the podcast at here'show.ie/call.
On a Skype line now, I have Linda Irvine. Her husband, Brian Irvine, is a former leader of the small Progressive Unionist Party, and her brother-in-law, David Irvine, was a member of the UVF. He was arrested in 1974 while driving a stolen car transporting a bomb, and he was later convicted of possession of explosives with intent to endanger life. But after that, he played a key role in the negotiations that led to the Good Friday Agreement. Linda, that's your sort of family background. I know you regard yourself as a unionist, but you also took the role as first president of the East Belfast GAA, and you've been learning Irish for many years, and I know that you've started a degree in Irish in Queen's. That makes you very different from an awful lot of people in the unionist community. Why are you doing this?
Well, I suppose, first of all, I have to say, some of the things you said, that's my husband's family background. My family background is actually very different. My family, though I'm from the same area and the same sort of background, Protestant working class, my family's political outlook was very different. My family are communists. So I suppose that had a big influence on me. And, maybe that's one of the reasons why I found it easier to get involved in the things that I have. I've always regarded myself as Irish. Of course, I'm Irish. I was born on this island. I'm also British. So, getting involved with the Irish language wasn't strange for me. The journey into the GAA, I have to say, has been different. It has caused me some concerns, some worries. It does feel like very alien ground for me. But
How so?
Well, basically because, I knew nothing about GAA. I had been invited to one match. My husband and I were brought down to Croke Park a number of years ago to see a hurling match, and that was the first ever experience I had, and I found it very exciting. But apart from that, I really had never had any engagement with GAA games. I'd met people from GAA and spent a week in the Gaeltacht with the GAA. But again, my knowledge of it was very, very sketchy. My concerns around the GAA are a number of things. Firstly, their constitution. I don't believe that, sport should mix with politics. So I don't believe to be a member of the GAA or to play GAA games that you should be signing up to a 32 County Ireland. Now, I think, the aspiration for a 32 County Ireland is a valid aspiration, but it has got nothing to do with running about a pitch with a ball. To me, that's just ridiculous. I also have some concerns.
Pause on that for a second. Are you sure that's ridiculous? Because, of course, the GAA was set up very much as an organisation to promote cultural nationalism and to promote self-confidence in Ireland. And there can be no argument that it contributed in the 19th century to the revival of nationalism.
Yeah, but we're in a very different place now. And it's a bit like, the Orange Order when it was set up, at a different time. And it has a rule that none of its members can attend the Mass. Now, many of its members do attend Masses. So again, to me, these are outdated rules that need to be changed. The GAA over the last number of years have made changes to, some of its rules and regulations. They have been involved in a lot of work to reach out to create more diversity within their ranks. And I feel if they're serious about that, and I do believe they are serious about it, but I think then they need to go back and look at some of the things that may alienate people from the unionist community.
Which
now,
would be?
I don't have an issue with promoting, a Gaelic identity, because I believe a Gaelic identity, of course, stretches, outside Ireland and in Scotland and the Isle of Man, for instance. So to promote a Gaelic identity in a positive way, I think, that's fine. But again, a Gaelic identity doesn't have, anything for me to do with the 32 County Ireland, because it goes beyond that. So, promote a Gaelic identity, yes, but, scrub the bit about a 32 County Ireland, because many of the membership within the GAA, will, have an aspiration towards a 32 County Ireland. But I think the GAA have to acknowledge that many won't as well. So, it's like saying, to be a member of the IAFA, the Irish Football Association, that, you should be signing up to, a United Kingdom. Well, that to me wouldn't make any sense, and I believe it would be wrong. So I feel the same in this instant. I feel the GAA need to go back and say, okay, this is where our origins were, this is why we came about. But this is 2020. We're in a different place, and we acknowledge the diversity of people within our ranks, and also our desire to increase that diversity, our desire to welcome people in who maybe didn't normally engage with GAA. So let's take away any barriers that may, inhibit that.
Okay. You said you came from a communist background, which is an interesting thing to say the least. What do you think of the Marxist analysis that says that the British ruling class used the sectarian division in Ireland, particularly in Northern Ireland, to prevent any threat from the working class to the interests of the ruling class?
Well, I grew up with that concept. My father would have always said that it was divide and conquer, and that sectarianism was used to keep working class people from uniting and sort of fighting against the injustices. And I believe there's probably a lot of truth in that. I think working class people are stronger together, and sectarianism has been a cancer within not just Northern Ireland, but within Ireland. And, and I can see how the South, what it appears to me to have moved on beyond that. But in Northern Ireland, unfortunately, we're still stuck in this tribalism.
Mm-hmm. I want to talk to you about, because I want to give people an idea of the range of opinion, and I'm sure you're well aware that there's a broad range of opinion in Northern Ireland that goes beyond maybe the sort of cliched views that people might have in their head. And we had, I'm sure you're aware of Jamie Bryson on this podcast before, and he rather colourfully said he'd rather die choking on his own blood in Northern Ireland than join a republic with streets paved of gold. What proportion of the unionist community do you think he represents?
I think a minority. I think a hardline minority. And I think, unfortunately in Northern Ireland we have the two extremes, the Republican extreme and the Loyalist extreme.
Sure, but we get a load about the Republicans, so I'm not interested in talking about them today. I'm thinking just particularly within the unionist community. He clearly would be at one end of a spectrum. You might be towards the other end of the spectrum. Where do you think the centre of gravity lies?
Well, I think there's a lot of people within Northern Ireland, within the unionist community, who wouldn't have the extreme views that Jamie would have, but would have concerns and valid concerns about what a united Ireland might mean. And,
do you?
Do I have? Yeah, I do have. And
tell me what they are.
Well, I mean, just the normal concerns. What would happen to my pension? What about the National Health Service? The practical things. So those would be the financial things. It's much easier to stay with the status quo, and I think that's true for a lot of people.
Hold on, Linda. When people go painting men with balaclavas and AK-47s on the end of gable ends around East Belfast, they're not really thinking about the NHS and their pensions, are they?
No, but again, they're their extremes. The majority of people, if you said to somebody who lives at the end of that street, does that represent you? They would say no. The majority of people in that street say no. In fact, I probably don't. Most people would say I don't want that on my gable wall, but I'm afraid to speak out. So, I think when people go into an area and they see certain images or, they see certain flags, they think that represents everybody. But, you go into any area and, there's very diverse school of thought, and you would get people in one area from the unionist community who may be in favour of a united Ireland. And, so the whole thing with Brexit, I have came to, become aware that there are people now speaking out within the unionist community who are saying, I think actually United Ireland would be better. But that's something you never would have heard years ago.
Really? Pause. Wait. But you're absolutely right. That's something you wouldn't have heard years ago. But roll back on that. Give me more detail on that. People who you regard as unionists saying maybe that would be better. Put meat on those bones.
I think they're a small number of people. I think, again, they would be a minority, but they exist. And I suppose what's interesting is that, years ago, people would have been afraid to voice those opinions because they were in the minority. But now people feel, free to be able to do that. So a number of people, because of Brexit, are saying, well, actually, we might be better off. This might be preferable. I'm European or whatever. So there's more diversity of thought within the unionist community, I suppose I'm saying. Now, I think the majority would still be very wary of a united Ireland, and the majority would still want to sign up to a United Kingdom. Again, I don't think they have the extreme view that Jamie has, but they would be people like myself that would be sitting down and looking at the practicalities of it. Where does it sit? And also, I think the big thing that I would worry about, and I think other people would share the same feelings, is that, if we came to a point where a referendum said United Ireland, and I signed up to the Good Friday Agreement, so I've said I'll go that way and I will. But my worry is that some people, I suppose the people who Jamie would represent, they will turn to violence. And I don't want to return to violence,
Okay, pause that. We'll talk about those in a second. But thinking more broadly of, the broad swathe of the unionist / loyalist community. And there have been various polls, some going one way, some going notably the other, particularly the Lord Ashcroft polls, which gave a 51-49 result in favour of joining the Republic. So just marginally ahead, but very notably the first time that joining the Republic had a majority. But the really noticeable thing about that was that the strong support from the United Kingdom in the demographic breakdown came from people aged over 65. Everybody under 65 was in a demographic where there was a nationalist majority, and the younger the demographic, the stronger the nationalist majority, down to 60-40 in the 18 to 24s. So in other words, it's like steps of a stairs going downwards as you get older for nationalism and upwards for unionism. Yeah, that might not be true now. So 51-49, that's margin of error. Yeah. But you add 10 years on, that is going to change, isn't it?
Well, it doesn't surprise me what you're saying, because I think, again, there's the two extremes, but I think a lot of young people are probably a lot more liberal in their views. They didn't live through the Troubles. They're more open to other ideas. They're not as they're not as caught in the past and just the limitations.
You're saying young people, but you mean young loyalists, young unionists, young Protestants are less opposed to a Northern United Ireland or more in favour of it?
I think some are. Again, there's a mixture. Some are less opposed and some are more in favour. I think there's a mixture there.
And would that be, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I've got a suspicion that maybe there are some young people whose defining issues are just not British Irish. It might be, for example, on gay marriage. It might be on abortion rights. It might be on a range of other liberal issues. And they see the Republic being more progressive. And it's on that basis that they say, actually, that's the side I'm on.
Possibly. I can't comment on their own views. I just feel that in Northern Ireland, the Northern Ireland that I grew up in, the generation that I come from, it was all about a flag. It was all about an identity. A Union Jack or a tricolour, 1916 or 1690. And I think young people, not all young people, but I think some young people within the unionist community, that's not how they're thinking. They're thinking outside the box. I suppose they're thinking independently now. They're not as influenced by the past as my generation were. And so they look at it in a different way, and they look at Brexit and they think, well, we don't want Brexit. This doesn't sit well with us. This isn't, good for our future. We want to stay European. And, how could we do that? Well, if we stay part of if it becomes United Ireland, and they don't see the same barriers, I suppose, that maybe their parents or grandparents saw. And so for them, it is an economic decision and less about a flag or an identity.
Okay, but you say obviously that's still within unionism significantly a minority, Looking at the broad swathe of opinion and maybe leaving aside the Jamie Bryson type swathe of opinion, would you say that most unionists in Northern Ireland, in the event that they lost a border poll, would say, well, I'm disappointed, but I'll live with it?
I think the majority of rational, reasonable people will, yeah.
That's again, a qualifier. Wait, that's a big qualifier. That's a big qualifier. The majority of the whole population, do you think they'd live with it?
I suppose it depends what it offers. I mean, again, there will be people like Jamie who say, well, I don't care if the streets are paved with gold, it's not what I want. Mm-hmm. But I think most people, and even some maybe hardened people, will be practical and say, okay, but what's this going to mean for me and my family, for my children?
So when Arlene Foster says that she didn't think she could live in Northern Ireland if it wasn't in the UK, do you think she's out of step with her constituency?
I would say so. I couldn't see. I think there'd be a minority of people who would leave. I don't think most people would leave. I think most people would stay and give it a go and see how it's going to affect them.
And I mentioned there that demographic pattern whereby as years go by, each of those demographic groups is being fed by the younger group that has a much larger nationalist cohort. Is there an awareness in the unit? Is there an awareness in the unionist community that there might be a clock ticking on the union?
Yeah, I think some people are aware of that. And again, you hear different schools of thought. You hear people who feel that it's inevitable. This will happen someday. The nationalist community is growing and the unionist community is shrinking, and it just will happen. I don't necessarily agree with that. I just think because somebody is Catholic or from the nationalist community, I don't necessarily believe that they will automatically vote for United Ireland, and vice versa with the unionist community. Mm-hmm. And I believe, that unionism could very easily turn things around, and make the UK an attractive place for people from, within the nationalist community. And
what's the odds of that happening with Boris Johnson as Prime Minister?
Well, not good at the minute, and I don't think unionism has made a much of a fist off it over the last lot of years.
What's your opinion of the quality of leadership in the unionist community?
Very poor, very poor. I think sometimes the leadership has been living as if it was 50 years ago, and it's never, 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 no, and that doesn't work anymore. It's about reaching out, it's about compromise. And sometimes it has managed to do that. But, when you saw the things over, for instance, the Irish language legislation, mm-hmm. I mean, that was just wrong. It was petty. And
again, just for people who are not familiar with that was the Irish Language Act, which is very much supported by Sinn Féin, very much opposed by the DUP, and it would appear just for the sake of opposing it. Would you think so?
Well, I think it's because it was Irish language, where, to me, the DUP could have very easily taken the stance of, this is something that happens in British life. We have language legislation in Scotland, we have language legislation in Wales. This is a British thing. Also, for me, the language links us as a group of islands, because Gaelic went over to Scotland and to the Isle of Man. It's part of the family of Celtic languages mm-hmm. spoken throughout the British Isles. That's a message that could have easily been promoted. But instead, the message that unionism promoted was, this will hollow out your Britishness. Oh, this will damage, this will lead us all into United Ireland. Well, of course, that's a lot of nonsense. But, a barrier towards it, alienating people, that will lead, Northern Ireland into United Ireland. Those are the very things. Brexit is helping to lead Northern Ireland into United Ireland. So on one hand, unionism saying they're standing out against it and actually paving the way towards it. I don't get that. I don't understand it,
Another opinion poll trend is perhaps for the whole of this year, the pro-independence side in Scotland has been leading in the polls, and the tide does seem to be very much in their favour. The cultural connection between unionists and Britain is very much more to Scotland than to England. If Scotland became independent, would unionists have anything to be unionist too?
Well, this is a big question. That if Scotland goes, it leaves Northern Ireland in a very weakened situation. And unfortunately, again, and I put it at the feet of the Tory party, they made promises to Scotland and then let them down. And the people who, their heart said Scotland and their head said UK, felt very betrayed after the referendum and have said that if they get another chance, they will vote for independence. And I would imagine if another referendum comes, then, Scotland will go. I suppose it's worrying times for the union, and I personally feel that, the union that has existed for, whatever number, so many 100 years, it doesn't work anymore. Rule from London doesn't work for Northern Ireland, doesn't work for Scotland, Wales, or even the north of England. And what I would like to see is, I'm not so worried about a united Ireland. I'm worried about a break from the rest of the UK, if that makes sense. So, if I was in charge and I could make the decision, I would create an independent federation of islands where Scotland, Wales, England, maybe even North and South, I don't know. And I don't know about Ireland, whether it would be an all-Ireland or a North and South divide, but that we would all have our independence, we would all have our own, rule from our, home rule, but that we would work very, very closely with each other. And I suppose those familial and geographical ties that we have to each other, if we could use those in a positive way, to me, that would be the answer of a new sort of a union, but an independent union.
Do you think that's feasible outside the EU, or do you think that's feasible with the type of Tory ideology that's in power in London?
Well, I don't want the Tory ideology. I don't think any working class person would. And now Britain leaving the EU has complicated that much more, and just created another barrier to it, I suppose.
Yes. You mentioned, and I think you agreed with me, that the quality of leadership amongst unionism is poor. Is that partly because essentially well-educated unionists, they're getting their education, they go to university, they leave school and they go to university in Britain and they don't come back. Catholics, nationalists go to university in Ireland and hang around, and that's part of what's causing the demographic shift. That's one issue, but it's also partly what's causing the crisis of leadership.
Well, I mean, it's a generalisation to say that all Protestants go across the water and don't come back.
Not all, but differentially.
Yeah, many do. There's a brain drain, yes, and I get that. But I'm sure that doesn't help, but I think it's bigger than that. I just think there's an ethos within unionist parties that is out of step, even with their own communities. I think the communities are a lot more liberal. And you can see that there's a rise in the more middle ground parties, the Alliance Party and Green Party and so on. And a lot of unionist people.
That's that's the children of unionists voting for those parties, isn't it?
Older people as well, because they just feel, unionism, the never, never, never attitude, the narrow attitude, the flag waving doesn't represent me, And I see a lot of older people from within the unionist community who will sign up to Alliance and sign up to the Green Party and so on, because they're sickened. They're just sickened and don't, they just can't relate to what unionism is saying. And, yes, it's partly about the anti-abortion, anti-gay marriage, all those sorts of attitudes, but it's the attitude of, when I feel like it myself, when I see something coming through my door and it's got a big flag all over it, I'm not voting for that party, because this is not, these are council elections, for talk's sake. This is not about the referendum on, United Ireland or UK. This is about bins and council things. So stop shoving that in my face. And it's, it's been a trick that unionist leadership has played on communities for years. Turn up fly a big flag and vote for me, and then I'm away and I'll do nothing for you. And people have just been sold out with that nonsense. I'm tired of that. I want to be represented properly, and I don't want to be represented as a Protestant. I want to be represented as, a person in a community in Northern Ireland. I don't care if somebody's Catholic or Protestant. I don't care about those things. I want to be represented properly, and I want to support and vote for political organisations who don't care either. And someday, if we come to a referendum, then I want the party that I vote for to sit down and talk about it properly and talk about it in practical ways. How is this going to impact people in a practical, everyday manner?
Finally, Linda, if you were to talk to nationalists or Republicans who might be listening, and there was one thing that you could say that they could do that would make you maybe more open or at least less closed to United Ireland, what would it be?
Well, what I don't want to see extremes from them.
Sure. But give me a positive thing. What could they do that would mean you would be more amenable?
Don't be anti-British. Because I'm British. Don't be anti-British. You have to embrace other people's Britishness, embrace that difference. Because, again, when I see extreme Republican views, and I have no issue with somebody being Republican, but when I see very hostile, extreme Republican views, that really would make me back off massively. I don't want to hear that. I don't want to see that. I don't want to be part of that. And I certainly don't want to be in a country that's the ethos,
Linda Irvine, Irish language activist and president of East Belfast GAA, thank you very much for talking to me.
Thank you, Vanya.
Make your view heard. Dial 076 603 5060 and leave a contribution for the show. You can find tips on how to record a good contribution and other ways to contact the podcast at here'show.ie/call.
Go to the website for sources and references from the show, and while you're there, you can like the show on Facebook, follow the show on Twitter at Here's How Podcast, follow Linda Irvine at Linda Irvine, and get in touch with me if you can suggest a guest or a topic for a future show. And thanks again to Paddy and to Jason and all of the other patrons on Patreon. Their donations allow me to devote more time to research and finding interesting guests. And if you could do the same as them and donate $1 or $2 per podcast or per month, please go to patreon.com/here'show. That link is on the website. Also there you can find out how to subscribe to the podcast for free on your computer, on your phone or by email. All of that information is at www.here'show.ie. The next show will be uploaded next Thursday, the 10th of September. I'll be talking to the veteran Labour Party councillor Dermot Lacey about local government in Ireland. The Here's How podcast is produced and presented by me, William Campbell. Thank you for listening.